For 32 years, I was the safety net, the quiet fixer who covered rent and smoothed over crises without asking for a dime back. But the second I landed a bonus big enough to buy my own freedom, the script flipped. My sister, Melissa, didn't congratulate me. She looked at me with cold, expectant eyes and demanded half of it. She said she had children and I had nothing, except, apparently, a debt I never signed up for. The fluorescent lights above my cubicle at Meridian Insight had a specific hum, a low-frequency buzz that seemed to burrow directly into the base of my skull by 4 in the afternoon. I rubbed my temples, staring at the rows of data on my dual monitors. This was my life: rows, columns, pivot tables, and the endless, frantic emails of clients who believed the world would end if their quarterly projections were off by 0.5%. I was a project manager, a title that sounded authoritative, but mostly meant I was a professional shock absorber. I absorbed the panic of the stakeholders, the frustration of the developers, and the impossible deadlines that came down from upper management. I stretched my arms over my head, hearing the satisfying pop of my spine. I was 32 years old, and sometimes I felt twice that age. My lower back carried the tension of a decade spent trying to be the adult in every room I entered. I glanced at the clock in the corner of my screen. It was almost 5. Most people were already packing up, sliding laptops into bags and talking about happy hour plans. I was not most people. I had another 2 hours of work to clear before I could even think about the commute back to my apartment. My apartment? Even the thought of it gave me a small, private thrill. It was not much to look at. It was a one-bedroom walk-up on the 4th floor of a building that smelled permanently of boiled cabbage and old carpet, located in a neighborhood that real estate agents generously called up-and-coming. The radiator clanked, the water pressure was temperamental, and the view from my living room window was a brick wall. But it was mine. I paid the rent on time. Every single month, I bought my own groceries. I did not ask anyone for help. That independence was the single most expensive thing I owned, and I guarded it with a ferocity that few people understood. My phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at the screen, and my stomach tightened. It was a text from my mother. "Linda, just checking in. Melissa is having a hard week. Call when you can." I flipped the phone face down. A hard week? Melissa always had a hard week. My older sister's life was a perpetual series of crises, a storm that never seemed to run out of rain. If it was not her transmission blowing out, it was her landlord threatening eviction. If it was not the landlord, it was an issue with her ex-husband regarding child support. If it was not the ex-husband, it was a sudden medical bill for one of the kids, usually because of something preventable. I loved my sister. I loved my niece and nephew, but for as long as I could remember, our family dynamic had been etched in stone. Melissa was the kite, wild and erratic, prone to getting stuck in trees or crashing into power lines. I was the anchor. I was the one who stood on the ground, holding the string, digging my heels in so she did not fly away completely. And anchors, by design, were heavy. They were expected to sink so others could float. I turned back to my work, forcing my brain to focus on the deliverable for the Meridian project. This specific account had been a nightmare for 6 months. The client had changed the scope 3 times. The lead developer had quit in the middle of a sprint, and the budget had been bleeding out since February. I had stepped in when everyone else had written it off as a loss. I had worked weekends. I had placated the client. I had reorganized the workflow and managed to deliver the final build 2 days ahead of schedule. It was good work. It was the kind of work that usually got rewarded with a pat on the back and a generic thank you email. A shadow fell across my desk. I looked up to see David, my department head, standing there with a strange expression on his face. He looked serious, which was not unusual, but there was a tightness around his eyes that made my pulse jump. "Ruby," he said, "can you come to my office? Bring your laptop, and Sharon from HR is going to join us." My heart hammered against my ribs. HR, the 2 letters that terrified every corporate employee. I stood up, my legs feeling like jelly. I ran through a mental checklist of every email I had sent in the last month. Had I been too curt with a client? Had I accidentally violated a compliance policy? Was the firm downsizing? I followed David down the hallway, clutching my laptop like a shield. The walk felt incredibly long. When we entered his office, Sharon was already seated, her hands folded over a manila folder. She smiled. But HR smiles were designed to be neutral, offering no clues. Close the door. Ruby, David said. I sat down, my hands trembling slightly in my lap. I tried to keep my breathing even. David sat behind his desk and leaned forward. Ruby, we wanted to talk to you about the Insight project. He began. I braced myself. Here it comes. I thought, they are going to tell me I overstepped. They are going to tell me the client was still unhappy. We know how difficult that account was. David continued. We know the hours you put in. We know that without your intervention in March, we would have lost the contract entirely. That client represents 12% of our annual revenue. I nodded, my throat dry. I just did what needed to be done. I said. David exchanged a look with Sharon. She opened the folder and slid a piece of paper across the desk toward me. It was a letter on company letterhead. We do not just want to thank you verbally, Sharon said, her voice warm. The partners reviewed the quarterly performance metrics. They were extremely impressed with your leadership. They have authorized a discretionary performance bonus. I looked down at the paper. I scanned the text, my eyes blurring until they landed on the bolded line in the center of the page. $50,000. The air left the room. I stared at the words. $50,000. I blinked. Sure, I had misread it. Maybe it was 5,000. 5,000 would have been amazing. 5,000 would have paid off my credit card and left a little for savings. But the word 50 was unmistakable. Is this? I started, my voice cracking. Is this correct? It is correct, David said, grinning now. And it is well deserved. Ruby, you saved us a lot more than that. It will be paid out in the next payroll cycle. Minus taxes, of course. I sat there, stunned into silence. $50,000, even after taxes. That was more money than I had ever seen in my bank account at one time. It was life-changing. I walked out of that office 10 minutes later in a daze. I went back to my desk, packed up my things, and walked to the elevator. I felt lightheaded. I felt like I was floating. The subway ride home was a blur of noise and motion that I barely registered, usually. I spent the commute listening to podcasts and trying to ignore the smell of damp wool and exhaust. Today, I sat squeezed between a teenager playing music too loud and a businessman reading a tablet, and I was miles away. I stared at my reflection in the darkened train window. A 32-year-old woman with tired eyes and frizzy brown hair pulled back in a clip, but behind those eyes, a calculator was running at furious speed. $50,000. I closed my eyes and let the numbers dance. First, the student loans. I still owed $12,000 on my undergraduate degree. I had been chipping away at it for a decade, watching the interest eat up half my payments. I could write a check and kill it. Gone, just like that. Then, the credit card. $2,000 from when my car broke down last year. Gone. That left roughly $26,000. Assuming taxes took a big bite. $26,000. That was a down payment. The thought made my chest ache with longing. I could move out of the apartment with the brick wall view. I could buy a small condo, maybe something with a balcony, maybe something with a washer and dryer in the unit, so I did not have to haul my laundry down to the basement on Sundays. I could stop throwing money into a black hole of rent. I could build equity. I could have something that was truly, legally mine. Then, inevitably, the guilt crept in. It was a cold, familiar sludge in my gut. $50,000 was an abstract fortune to my family. My father, Gordon, had worked in a warehouse his whole life until his back gave out. My mother, Linda, worked part-time at a bakery. They got by, but just barely. There was never extra. And Melissa lived in a rental house that was too small for her and the two kids. Her husband, Eric, worked construction, but the work was seasonal and inconsistent. They were always one paycheck away from disaster. I remembered the last time I saw Melissa. She looked exhausted, her hair unwashed, wearing a stained sweatshirt. She had been crying because she could not afford the registration fee for my nephew's soccer league. It was $80. I had given her the money. Of course, I always did. If they knew I had $50,000 coming. I shook my head, opening my eyes as the train screeched into my station. No. I stepped onto the platform, the cool evening air hitting my face. I walked up the stairs to the street, clutching my bag strapped tight. This money was for me. I had earned it. I had stayed late while Melissa was going to parties in her 20s. I had studied while she was planning a wedding she could not afford. I had chosen the boring, stable path while she chased excitement. Was it fair that I had this windfall while she struggled? Maybe not in a cosmic sense, but in a practical sense, it was the result of 1,000 small choices I had made. I needed to talk to someone who would understand, someone who was not family. I pulled out my phone and called Jenna. Jenna was my coworker, my best friend, and the only person who knew the full extent of my family drama. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, you escaped the dungeon early," she said. "I need a drink." I said, "Meet me at the place on 4th?" 20 minutes later, we were sitting in a booth at our regular dive bar. I had ordered a gin and tonic, and I was gripping the glass like a lifeline. "Okay, spill it," Jenna said, narrowing her eyes. "You have the look." "Did David fire you? Did you quit?" I smiled, and it felt like the first real smile I had worn in years. "I got a bonus," I whispered. Jenna leaned in. "A nice bonus? Like a new purse bonus?" I looked around to make sure no one was listening. Then I leaned across the table and whispered the number. Jenna's jaw dropped. She stared at me for a full 5 seconds. "Oh my God. Ruby!" she screeched, then clapped a hand over her mouth. "Holy cow. That is huge." "I know," I said, letting out a breath I felt like I had been holding since the meeting. "I can pay off my loans. I can look for a condo." Jenna reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her eyes were shining. "I am so proud of you. You deserve this so much. You work harder than anyone I know." "Thank you," I said, feeling tears prick my eyes. Then Jenna's expression turned serious. She took a sip of her beer and set it down carefully. "Ruby, listen to me," she said. "You cannot tell them." I did not have to ask who she meant. "I know," I said, stirring the ice in my glass. "I know. I am serious," Jenna said, her voice dropping. "If Linda knows, Melissa knows. And if Melissa knows, she will want it." I finished. "She will expect it," Jenna corrected. "Remember the tax refund incident of 22? Remember when you got that small inheritance from your great-aunt?" I winced. When I was 22, I had received a tax refund of $1,200. I had mentioned it at dinner by the end of the night. My mother had convinced me that the right thing to do was to give half of it to Melissa to help with a security deposit. I had done it because I wanted to be a good sister. Melissa had moved out of that apartment 3 months later, losing the deposit. "It is different this time," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "This is my future. Jenna, this is my house. Just promise me you will be careful." Jenna said, "Keep it vague. Do not give them a number. Once they hear a number, they do not see your hard work. They just see a pile of cash that they think belongs to the family pot. I promise." I said, "I will keep my mouth shut." Sunday lunch at my parents' house was a ritual that had survived for 3 decades, no matter what was happening in our lives. We were expected to be at the small, siding-clad house on Elm Street at 1 in the afternoon. The house always smelled the same: roast chicken, lemon pledge, and a faint undercurrent of cigarette smoke from my dad's secret habit in the garage. I walked in and braced myself. The TV was blaring a football game in the living room. My dad was in his recliner, shouting at the screen. "Hi, Dad," I said, kissing his cheek. "Hey, Ruby girl," he said, barely taking his eyes off the game. "Grab me a beer, will you?" I walked into the kitchen. My mother was at the stove, mashing potatoes with a violence that suggested she was working through some things. "Hi, Mom," I said. Linda turned, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked tired. She always looked tired these days. Her graying hair was pulled back, and there were deep lines around her mouth. "There she is," Linda said, offering me a tight smile. "How is the big city corporate life?" "It is fine." "Mom," I said, opening the fridge to get Dad's beer. "Just busy. Melissa is not coming today," Linda said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Eric took the car to go fishing with his buddies, and she is stuck at home with the kids. She is pretty upset." I felt a pang of guilt, followed immediately by a wave of relief. A lunch without Melissa meant a lunch without drama. It meant I did not have to watch her pick at her food while making passive-aggressive comments about my outfit or my job. "That is too bad," I said, handing the beer to my dad in the living room before returning to help with the potatoes. We sat down to eat 20 minutes later. The table was small. The tablecloth faded. We ate in the rhythm of a family that had run out of new things to say to each other years ago. "So," Gordon said, chewing on a chicken leg, "you seeing anyone?" "No." "Dad," I said, "not right now. Working too hard." Linda said, shaking her head, "You are going to wake up one day and realize you forgot to have a life." "Ruby, a career does not keep you warm at night." I gripped my fork. I liked my career. I liked that it paid me. I liked that it did not scream at me or demand things I could not give. "Actually, work is going really well," I said, a little defensively. "I just finished a huge project." "Oh?" Linda looked up. Her interest piqued. "The one that was keeping you late?" "Yes," I said. "It was a big success. The partners were really happy." "Did you get a raise?" Gordon asked bluntly. I hesitated. This was the moment. I could lie. I could say nothing happened. But there was a part of me, the part that was still a little girl wanting her parents to be proud of her, that wanted to share the win. "Not a raise, exactly," I said, focusing intently on my mashed potatoes. "But I got a bonus." Linda's eyes widened. "A bonus? That is nice. Like a Christmas bonus?" "It is a performance bonus." I said, "It is substantial." "How substantial?" Gordon asked. 500? 1,000? I took a sip of water. "More," I said softly. Linda put down her fork. "Ruby, how much?" I looked at them. I saw the curiosity, but I also saw the calculations starting behind their eyes. I should have lied. I should have said 2,000, but the number was so big, so real. It felt heavy in my mouth. "It is enough to pay off my student loans," I said, "and maybe start looking for a place to buy." The silence at the table was deafening. My student loans were $12,000. If I had enough for that and a down payment, they could do the math. "Wow," Gordon said, letting out a low whistle. "Good for you." "Ruby?" Linda stared at me. Her face went through a complex series of expressions: shock, pride, and then, inevitably, calculation. "That is wonderful news," she said. She reached across the table and patted my hand. "Melissa will be so relieved to hear this," she said. My stomach dropped. I pulled my hand back, perhaps a little too quickly. "Why would Melissa be relieved?" I asked, my voice tight. Linda blinked, as if the answer were obvious. "Well, you know how much she has been struggling," Linda said. "The car needs new brakes. The kids need clothes for school. She was just saying yesterday that she does not know how she is going to make it through the month. Knowing you have this cushion, it takes the pressure off the whole family." The air in the kitchen suddenly felt very thin. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "this bonus is for my loans, and for a house. It is not. It is not a winning lottery ticket for everyone to share." Linda's smile faltered. "Just a fraction." "Of course," she said. "Of course. It is your money." "Ruby, nobody is saying it isn't, but you know how we are. We look out for each other. When one of us does well, we all do well. That is what family is." She picked up her fork and went back to her potatoes, acting as if the conversation was settled, as if the distribution of my wealth had already been decided in her head. I finished my meal in silence. The food tasted like ash. I left as soon as I politely could. I drove home with the radio off, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I knew that tone. I knew that look. The seed had been planted. Linda was already spending my money in her mind. She was already imagining the relief of not having to lend Melissa $50 for groceries because I would do it. She was imagining me stepping into the role I was born for, the safety net. When I got back to my apartment, I did not turn on the lights. I sat at my small kitchen table and opened my laptop. I pulled up a spreadsheet. I typed in the number, 50,000. I created a column for taxes, a column for loans, a column for the credit card. I watched the number shrink. But what remained was still beautiful. It was freedom. It was a key to a door I had been banging on for 10 years. I can help a little. I whispered to the empty room. I could give Melissa $1,000, maybe $2. That would be generous. That would be more than fair. But I knew, deep down, that fairness had nothing to do with it. Melissa did not want fairness. She wanted equality of outcome without the equality of effort. I typed furiously, outlining a budget for a condo, closing costs, inspection fees, moving trucks. I needed every penny of this bonus to make it work. If I started peeling off bills for Melissa's car, for her rent, for her debts, my down payment would vanish. I would be stuck in this apartment with the brick wall view for another 5 years. No, I said aloud. Not this time. I closed the laptop and rubbed my eyes. I was going to be strong. I was going to set a boundary. My phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up the dark kitchen. It was a text from Mom. I picked it up, dread pooling in my stomach. It was a photo. It was a picture of Melissa's 2 kids, Leo and Sarah. They were sitting on a ragged couch, smiling toothy, innocent smiles at the camera. They looked adorable. They also looked like they were wearing clothes that were a size too small. Below the photo was a message. They are so lucky to have such a successful aunt. They can't wait to see you. I stared at the glowing screen. It was not a congratulations. It was a weapon. It was a reminder of who I was supposed to be. It was a subtle, expertly crafted weight placed directly on my shoulders. I turned the phone off. I walked to my bedroom and lay down in the dark, staring at the ceiling. I had the money. I had the plan. But as I drifted into a restless sleep, I could feel the storm gathering on the horizon. I knew my sister. I knew my mother. The asking was over. The taking was about to begin. It took exactly 48 hours for the secret to leak. I should have known better. Telling my mother anything was like whispering into a megaphone. I was sitting at my desk on Tuesday morning, trying to focus on a new client brief, when my phone started buzzing against the laminate surface. It buzzed once, then again, then a rapid-fire staccato that made my heart jump. I looked down. The name on the screen was Melissa. I picked it up, unlocking the screen with a swipe of my thumb. The messages were coming in blue bubbles, one after another. Mom told me the news. Oh my God. Ruby? Rich girl? When are you coming over? We need to celebrate. Dinner tonight. Eric is cooking. Don't say no. The kids miss you. I stared at the words. Rich girl, and felt a cold stone settle in my stomach. The playfulness of the text did not fool me. My sister never used exclamation points unless she wanted something. And the mention of Eric cooking was a red flag all on its own. Eric did not cook. Eric ordered pizza or grilled frozen patties until they were charcoal. If Eric was cooking, it meant they were putting on a show. I typed back slowly. Mom shouldn't have said anything. It's not in the bank yet. Just a work thing. The reply was instantaneous. Stop being so modest. Mom said it's huge. Come over around 6. We have wine. I put the phone down and pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes. I could see the trap laid out in front of me. Clear as day. But I also knew the rules of our family. If I said no, I was the snob. If I said no, I was the one who thought she was too good for them. If I said no, I would get a guilt-tripping call from my mother about how I never made time for my niece and nephew. So, I did what I always did. I said yes. I pulled up to Melissa's house at 5:55. It was a small ranch-style house in a subdivision that had been built 30 years ago and had not seen much love since. The siding was a faded yellow, and there was a tricycle overturned in the middle of the driveway. The grass was long, tufts of weeds poking up through the cracks in the concrete. I sat in my car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of old coffee cups and air freshener. You are an adult, I told myself. This is your money. You earned it. Boundaries. I got out of the car and walked up the path. Before I could even knock, the door swung open. Melissa stood there. She was wearing a dress I recognized. It was one I had bought for her 3 birthdays ago. Her hair was blow-dried, which was rare for a Tuesday, and she had put on lipstick. "Ruby!" she cried, throwing her arms around me. The hug was tight, almost aggressive. She smelled of cheap vanilla perfume and something sharper, like nervousness. "Hey, Mel," I said, patting her back. "Good to see you." Come in," she said, ushering me inside. "Mom and Dad are already here." My stomach dropped another inch. This was not a dinner. This was a summit. I walked into the living room. The TV was off, which was the second red flag. Usually. Cartoons were blasting at ear-splitting volume. The room was tidy, the piles of laundry and toys shoved out of sight. My parents were sitting on the beige microfiber sofa, holding glasses of red wine. "There she is," my dad boomed. "The woman of the hour." "Hi, Dad." "Hi, Mom." I forced a smile and took a seat in the armchair that sat opposite the sofa. It felt like an interrogation chair. "Where are the kids?" I asked, looking around. "I brought them some stickers." "Oh, they are in their room playing," Melissa said quickly, waving a hand. "We wanted to have some adult time, to talk." She walked into the kitchen and came back with a glass of wine for me. It was filled to the brim. She handed it to me and then sat down next to Eric, who was perched on the edge of the love seat. Eric was a big guy with perpetual grease under his fingernails and a look of permanent exhaustion. He nodded at me, looking uncomfortable. "Hey, Ruby," he mumbled. "So," Melissa said, clapping her hands together, "Mom told us everything." I took a sip of the wine. It was warm and tasted like grape juice mixed with vinegar. "She probably told you more than there is to tell," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "It is just a bonus, Mel, a one-time thing. Don't downplay it," Linda said from the sofa. She leaned forward, her eyes bright. $50,000. That is what you said." I winced. Hearing the number out loud in this room felt dangerous. It hung in the air, sucking up all the oxygen. "That is the gross amount." "Mom," I said, "after taxes, it is a lot less, and I have plans for it. I need to pay off my loans." Melissa exchanged a look with Eric. It was a look of practiced communication, a signal passed between husband and wife. We know," Melissa said, leaning forward. "But Ruby, think about it. You are single. You have that cheap apartment. You have no dependents. $50,000 is... It is a fortune. It is not a fortune," I said, my grip on the wine glass tightening. "It is a down payment. It is my future." Melissa let out a sigh, the kind of dramatic exhale she used when she wanted to demonstrate how heavy her burden was. "Must be nice to think about the future," she said. "We are just trying to survive the present. Here we go. I thought, we got the notice from the daycare today," Melissa continued, her voice trembling slightly. "They are raising rates again, another $200 a month. And the van? Eric says the transmission is shot. It is going to cost $3,000 to fix it. If we don't fix it, he can't get to work. If he can't get to work, we lose the house." She looked at me, her eyes wide and pleading. "We are drowning, Ruby. Literally drowning. We put groceries on the credit card last week. I am terrified every time the phone rings that it is a bill collector." I felt the familiar pang of sympathy. I knew they struggled. I knew Eric worked hard, but could not seem to catch a break. I knew Melissa tried, in her own chaotic way. "I am sorry. Mel," I said gently, "that sounds really hard." "It is hard," she said, It is impossible. She took a deep breath and set her wine glass down on the coffee table. That is why we are so happy you finally have the chance to give back in a big way, she said. The room went silent. I stared at her. Give back? I repeated. Melissa nodded, a tight smile fixed on her face. We talked about it, she said, gesturing between herself and Eric, and we think it is only fair. Since you got this windfall, and since you don't have the expenses we do, we think you should give us half. I blinked. I felt like the world had tilted on its axis. Half? I said. You want $25,000? Melissa nodded vigorously. Exactly. It would wipe out our credit cards. It would fix the van. It would give us a cushion for the kids. It would change our lives. Ruby. I looked at my parents. I expected them to step in. I expected my father, who always prided himself on being a self-made man, to tell Melissa that she could not just ask for $25,000 instead. Gordon cleared his throat and looked at the floor. It would really help them out. Ruby, he said. Linda nodded in agreement. Sharing is what good families do, she said softly. You have been so blessed. Ruby, and Melissa. Well, she has had a run of bad luck. It would be the right thing to do. I looked back at Melissa. She was watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. She did not look like she was asking for a favor. She looked like she was waiting for a payment she was owed. I let out a short, incredulous laugh. You guys are joking, right? I said, looking around the room. This is a joke. Melissa's face hardened. Why would it be a joke? She asked. Because, I stammered, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. Because that is my money. I worked for it. I worked 60-hour weeks for 6 months. I missed weekends. I saved that project. And we work hard too, Melissa snapped, her voice rising. Do you think raising 2 kids isn't work? Do you think Eric breaking his back on a job site isn't work? Just because you sit in an air-conditioned office typing on a computer doesn't mean you work harder than us. I am not saying that. I said, but this is my compensation. It is for my life. Your life? Melissa scoffed. Ruby, you live in a box. You eat takeout. You have no one to take care of but yourself. You don't need that much money. What are you going to do with it? Hoard it? While your niece and nephew are wearing hand-me-downs? I felt a flash of anger. Real, hot anger. I am going to pay off my student loans. I said, my voice shaking. The loans I took out because Mom and Dad couldn't pay for my college. The loans I have been paying on for 10 years. Gordon shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. Now, Ruby, don't bring up the past, he said. We did the best we could. We supported you in plenty of other ways. Linda added quickly, who let you live at home for that summer after graduation? Who paid for your car insurance until you were 22? We all help each other. That is how it works. You owe us that loyalty. I stared at them. They were rewriting history in real time. They were tallying up a ledger of parental obligations and presenting it to me as a bill. I am not saying I don't want to help, I said, trying to de-escalate. I was already thinking I could help with the van repairs. I can give you a couple $1,000s to get the car fixed. I would be happy to do that. Melissa shook her head. A couple thousand? She said, her voice dripping with disdain. That is crumbs. Ruby, you are getting $50,000 and you want to toss us crumbs? It is not crumbs, I said, my voice rising. It is $2,000. That is a lot of money. Not compared to what you have, Melissa shouted. We are asking for half. Just half. You still keep $25,000. That is plenty for a single person. Why are you being so greedy? Greedy? I stood up. My legs were shaking. I am not being greedy. I am trying to build a foundation for myself. I want to buy a home. Melissa, I want to have a retirement fund. I want to have kids someday too. You don't have kids now, Melissa yelled, standing up to face me. I do. I have actual human beings who need things right now. Why does your imaginary future matter more than my real children? Because it is mine, I shouted back. The silence that followed was heavy and sharp. Eric put his head in his hands. My mother looked like she was about to cry. Melissa stared at me, her eyes cold. "So that is it," she said quietly. "You think you are better than us." I did not say that. I pleaded. "You didn't have to," she said. "You think because you went to college and got a fancy job that you are better than us. You think we are just screw-ups looking for a handout." "No, Mel," I said. "I think you are my sister and I love you. But I cannot be your bank. I cannot fix your life for you. I don't want you to fix my life." She spat. "I want you to be fair. I want you to care about your family more than your bank account. But clearly, I was wrong about you." She turned to our parents. "You see?" she said, gesturing at me. "You see how she is? She doesn't care. She would watch us starve as long as she can buy her precious condo." "Ruby, please," Linda said, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "Just think about it. Don't be so rigid. Your sister is hurting. Can't you just share? Just this once?" I looked at my mother. I saw the fear in her eyes, the desperate need to keep the peace, to make everything okay by sacrificing the path of least resistance. And I realized, with a clarity that hurt, that I was the path of least resistance. I was the one who was supposed to bend so Melissa did not break. But if I bent this time, I would break. I knew it. If I gave her half, 6 months from now she would need the other half. It would never be enough. "No," I said. The word hung there, stark and final. "I will not give you half my bonus," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "I will help with the van because I want the kids to be safe. But I am not splitting my income with you. I am sorry." Melissa's face turned a blotchy red. She stepped closer to me, invading my personal space. "Get out," she whispered. "Mel, get out," she screamed, pointing at the door. "Take your money and get the hell out of my house." I grabbed my purse. I did not look at my parents. I could not bear to see the disappointment in their eyes. Disappointment that I had finally refused to play my part. I walked to the door, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. As I opened the door, Melissa's voice followed me, shrill and shaking with rage. "You are going to regret this! Ruby," she shouted, "you are choosing money over your own flesh and blood. Don't expect us to be there when you are lonely and old in your big empty house." I slammed the door behind me. I ran to my car, fumbling with the keys. I locked the doors as soon as I was inside. I sat there for a moment, gasping for air, the tears finally spilling over. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely put the key in the ignition. I looked back at the house. The curtains were drawn, but I could feel the anger radiating from within. I had done it. I had said no. But as I drove away, into the darkening suburban streets, I did not feel free. I felt like I had just cut off a limb. I felt a mixture of shame and terror that made my stomach churn. I had kept the money, but I knew, with a sinking certainty, that I had just started a war. The drive home was a blur. I kept checking my rearview mirror, as if expecting Melissa's rusted minivan to be tailing me, headlights flashing, but the road behind me was empty. When I got into my apartment, I double-locked the door. I threw my purse on the floor and collapsed onto my couch. The silence of the apartment, usually my sanctuary, felt oppressive. It felt like the loneliness Melissa had predicted. My phone buzzed. I picked it up. It was a text from my dad. "You really upset your mother. She can't stop crying. I hope you are happy." I threw the phone across the room. It hit the cushion of the armchair and bounced onto the rug. I curled into a ball, pulling a throw blanket over my head. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call them back and say, "Fine, take it all, just stop hating me." But I bit my lip until it tasted like iron. I thought about the spreadsheet. I thought about the feeling of walking into a bank and writing a check for the full balance of my student loans. I thought about the balcony with the plants. "You are not wrong." I whispered into the dark, "You are not wrong." But the voice in my head sounded small and unconvinced against the chorus of my family's judgment. I did not sleep that night. I lay awake, listening to the sirens outside, replaying the look on Melissa's face, the entitlement, the fury, the absolute conviction that what was mine was actually hers. It wasn't just about the money. I realize that now. It was about the role I played. I was the responsible one, so she could be the chaotic one. I was the provider, so she could be the victim. If I stopped providing, if I kept my resources for myself, I was breaking the ecosystem. I was forcing them to face the reality of their own choices, and they hated me for it. By morning, the sadness had hardened into something else, something colder. I got up, made coffee, and retrieved my phone. There were 12 missed calls from Melissa, 3 from my mother. I did not listen to the voicemails. I knew what they would say. I went into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were puffy, but my jaw was set. I was not going to apologize. Not this time. I went to my laptop and opened my banking app. The bonus had not hit yet, but it would on Friday. I set up a transfer. The moment that money landed, every cent of the loan amount was going to the servicer. I was going to make it disappear before I could be guilted into giving it away. I was drawing a line in the sand. I just hoped I was strong enough to stand behind it when the tide came in. Because the tide was coming, I could feel it. Melissa was not done. She was just getting started. The silence of my apartment, once my refuge, had transformed into a pressure chamber. For 3 days following the disaster at Melissa's house, my phone did not stop vibrating. It buzzed on the nightstand while I tried to sleep. It danced across my desk while I tried to work. It hummed in my purse while I stood in line for coffee, making me jump every single time. They were not calling to scream anymore. Screaming took energy, and my family had moved on to a more efficient, insidious tactic: attrition. It started with the photos. Wednesday morning, I woke up to a picture of my nephew, Leo. He was sitting on the floor of their living room, holding a toy truck with a missing wheel. The caption read, "He asked if Auntie Ruby is coming to his game on Saturday. I didn't have the heart to tell him you're too busy counting your money." An hour later, a forwarded email from an energy company landed in my inbox. Sent from Melissa. The subject line was simply, FW, disconnection notice. The body of the email showed an overdue balance of $314. Melissa had added no text of her own. She just let the red font of the warning do the talking. It was a digital gauntlet thrown at my feet. "Look," she was saying, "look at what you are doing to us. By Thursday." My mother had joined the chorus. Her messages were softer, cloying, wrapped in the guise of concern that always made me feel like a rebellious teenager rather than a 32-year-old professional. "Your father is so worried about you. Ruby, he couldn't sleep last night. He thinks you have lost your way. We just want the sweet girl back who used to share her lunch money." I sat at my kitchen table Thursday night, the glow of the city filtering through the blinds. I felt hollowed out. I felt like a monster. Was I a monster? The question gnawed at me. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was being selfish. After all, I had $50,000 coming, well, closer to $35,000 after the government took its share, and they had disconnection notices. I reached for my phone to transfer the money for the electric bill. It was muscle memory. It was the reflex I had honed over a lifetime of smoothing things over. "Just pay it." The voice in my head whispered, "Just pay it and make the noise stop." But my thumb hovered over the banking app. I froze. If I paid this, what about next month? What about the van? What about the credit cards? I put the phone down and grabbed a notebook from my bag. I needed to see it. I needed to see the reality of my selfishness on paper. I uncapped a pen and wrote the list at the top of the page. I closed my eyes, casting my mind back, trying to dredge up the specific instances of financial intervention I had performed over the last few years. October, 2 years ago. I wrote, I remembered it vividly. Melissa had called me at midnight, sobbing. Eric had been laid off, and they were short on rent. The landlord was threatening to start eviction proceedings. I had just finished paying off my car, and I had a little savings. I transferred $600 to her account within 10 minutes. She promised to pay me back when Eric got his tax refund. I wrote, rent assistance, $600. Status, never repaid. March. last year. Melissa's car had broken down on the highway. She didn't have AAA. She called me. I paid for the tow truck. Then the mechanic called and said the radiator was cracked. Eric didn't have the cash. I put it on my credit card. I wrote, towing and radiator, $450. Status, never repaid. July, last year. My parents' anniversary. They wanted to go to a nice dinner, but money was tight. I sent them a gift card for $200 to a steakhouse. August, last year, school supplies. Melissa sent me a list of things the kids needed, saying she was drowning. I bought backpacks, notebooks, shoes, and a graphing calculator. I wrote, school supplies, $300. The list went on. It flowed out of me, ink scratching against the paper, the emergency vet bill for the cat they eventually gave away, the bail money. God, I had forgotten about the bail money. When Eric got picked up for a suspended license, the countless pizzas I ordered to their house because Melissa just couldn't deal with cooking tonight, the times I babysat for entire weekends so they could go to a wedding or a festival, canceling my own plans, saving them hundreds in childcare costs. I filled 2 pages. I stared at the numbers. I grabbed my phone and opened the calculator app. I started punching them in. 600 plus 450 plus 300 plus 200 plus. The final number stared back at me. $7,420. I sat back in my chair, the breath leaving my lungs. $7,000. That was a used car. That was half my student loan balance. That was a significant chunk of a down payment. I had not just been helping a little, I had been subsidizing their lifestyle for years. I had been a silent partner in their marriage, a third parent to their children, funding the gaps in their budget with my own hard work, and they called me selfish. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They did not see this money as a gift. They saw it as a subscription fee I paid for the privilege of being in the family. And now that I was trying to cancel the subscription, they were panicking. I looked at the phone again. The disconnection notice. I picked up the pen and drew a thick, dark line under the total. No, I said to the empty room, I did not pay the bill. Friday arrived with a gray, oppressive sky. I walked into the Meridian Insight offices, feeling like I was carrying a backpack filled with stones. I kept my head down, hoping to reach my cubicle without having to engage in cheerful small talk about weekend plans. I was settling in, turning on my computer. When Jenna appeared at the entrance to my cubicle, usually, Jenna greeted me with a joke or a complaint about the coffee. Today, her face was pale. She looked like she had seen a ghost. "Ruby," she said, her voice low and urgent. "You need to see this." She held out her phone. My stomach turned over. "What is it?" "Just look," she said. I took the phone. It was open to Facebook. It was a post from Melissa. It had been posted 3 hours ago. It must be nice. The post began. I read on, my blood running cold. It must be nice to live in a bubble where family doesn't matter. It must be nice to watch your own flesh and blood struggle to feed their kids while you sit on a pile of cash you don't even need. Some people think that just because they have a fancy job at a big data firm, they are better than everyone else. They think they can hoard their wealth while the people who raised them and loved them are suffering. It is disgusting. You know who you are. Enjoy your blood money. I hope it keeps you warm at night when you have no one left. I felt the room spin. She hadn't named me. She hadn't tagged me. But she had been specific enough. Fancy job at a big data firm. Everyone in our small hometown knew where I worked. Everyone in our extended family knew, but it was the comments that made me nauseous. Aunt Carol had commented, "So disappointed to hear this. Family should always come first." One of Melissa's high school friends had written, "That is sick. People like that deserve to be alone." And then, I saw it. The thing that made my heart stop. In the second paragraph, which I had missed in my initial panic, Melissa had written, "Meridian Insight gives out these huge bonuses to people who don't even have families to support. While the rest of us starve." She had named the company. She had publicly shamed my employer. I handed the phone back to Jenna, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped it. She tagged the company page in the comments. Jenna whispered, "That is how I saw it. It popped up on my feed because I follow the company." "Oh my God," I whispered. "Oh my God." "Jenna, does David know?" Jenna asked. "I don't know." I said, "I don't know." I looked across the office. David's door was closed. I felt a wave of pure terror. Meridian Insight was conservative. They cared about image. They cared about professionalism. Having an employee's family member ranting about blood money and starving children on a public forum was a PR nightmare in the making. I could lose my job. The thought cut through the fog of my panic. If I lost my job, I lost the bonus. I lost the salary. I lost the ability to pay the loans. I would be back to zero. I stood up. "I have to talk to him." I said, "I have to get ahead of this." Jenna nodded. "Go. I will cover for you if anyone asks." I walked to David's office. It felt like walking to the gallows. I knocked on the glass. David looked up. He was on the phone. He held up a finger, signaling for me to wait. I stood there for 2 minutes, sweating in the air-conditioned hallway. Every passing second felt like an hour. Finally, he hung up and waved me in. "Hey, Ruby," he said, smiling. "What can I do for you?" I closed the door behind me. I did not sit down. "David, I have to tell you something," I said, and I'm mortified. David's smile faded. He took off his glasses. "Is everything okay?" "No." I said, "It is about my sister." I took a breath and told him everything. I told him about the bonus. I told him about the demand for half. I told him about the refusal. And then I told him about the post. She mentioned the company. I said, my voice cracking. She tagged the page. "I am so sorry. I never authorized her to speak about me or my work. I have no control over what she posts. But I know how bad this looks." David listened in silence. He leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his chin. His expression was unreadable. When I finished, I stood there, waiting for him to tell me to pack my desk, waiting for him to say that Meridian Insight could not have this kind of drama attached to its brand. David sighed. He looked at his computer screen, typed a few keys, and then looked back at me. "I saw it," he said softly. My heart hammered. "You saw it?" "Our social media manager flagged it this morning." He said, "We had a brief discussion about it." I felt the tears pricking my eyes. "I am so sorry. David, I will ask her to take it down. I will." "Ruby, stop," David said. He held up a hand. He looked at me. And for the first time, his corporate mask slipped. He looked like a human being. He looked like a big brother. "You are not responsible for your sister's behavior," he said firmly. I blinked. "I am not?" "No," he said. "We looked at the post. It is clearly a personal domestic dispute. It reflects poorly on her, not on you, and certainly not on Meridian. We hid the comment on our page so it is not visible to the public. And we are ignoring it. That is the standard protocol for internet trolls, even related ones." I felt my knees go weak with relief. I grabbed the back of the chair to steady myself. "So I am not fired?" I asked, my voice small. David laughed. A short, dry sound. "Fired? Ruby, you are one of our best project managers. We are not going to fire you because your sister is having a meltdown on Facebook." He leaned forward, his face serious again. "But, Ruby, I want to give you some advice. Not as your boss, but as someone who has been around the block." I nodded. "Please, this kind of thing, it does not go away on its own," he said. "If she is willing to drag your employer into a personal fight, she has no boundaries. You need to protect yourself." "I know," I whispered, "and you need to keep this completely separate from work." He added, "Do not engage with her on that post. Do not reply. Do not defend yourself publicly. If you get down in the mud with her, you will just get dirty, and that is when it starts to look bad for us. You understand?" "I understand." I said, "Absolute silence." "Good," David said. "Now, go back to your desk. Take a breath. And Ruby?" "Yes?" Don't give her the money, he said. I looked at him, surprised. If you pay the ransom, he said, they never stop kidnapping you. I walked back to my desk, feeling lighter and yet heavier at the same time. My job was safe. That was the victory. But David's words rang in my ears. If you pay the ransom, they never stop kidnapping you. I sat down and looked at my phone. There were 3 new texts from Melissa. Did you see my post? People agree with me. Ruby, are you going to ignore me forever? Mom is really sick over this. I hope you're happy. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. It was different from the anger I had felt before. This was not hot and reactive. This was cool, clear, and sharp. She had tried to blow up my life. She had tried to destroy the one thing that was solely mine, my career. Just to squeeze money out of me. She did not care if I lost my job. As long as she got her cut first. I opened a blank document on my computer. I was not going to text this. Texting was for casual conversations. This was a declaration. I began to type. Melissa, Mom, Dad, I am writing this to everyone so there is no confusion and no triangulation. For the last 3 days, I have been harassed, guilt-tripped, and emotionally blackmailed. I have been sent bills that are not mine. I have been told I am selfish. And today, Melissa attempted to damage my professional reputation by posting lies about me and my company on social media. That was a line. You crossed it. I sat down last night and calculated the financial help I have given you over the last 5 years. It totals over $7,000. I paid rent. I paid for car repairs. I paid for school supplies. I did this because I loved you and I wanted to help. I never asked for it back. But you do not see that as help. You see it as your right. You believe that my money is family property. It is not. I earned this bonus. I worked nights and weekends for it. It is going to pay off the student loans that I took out because there was no family money to help me. It is going to buy a home so I have security. I am not giving you half. I am not giving you $10,000. I am not paying the electric bill. If you continue to harass me, if you continue to post about me or my job on social media, I will block your numbers. I will not come to Sunday dinner. I will remove myself from this family dynamic entirely until you can respect me as a separate person, not just a wallet. I love you. I want to be in your lives. But I will not buy my way in anymore. Ruby. I read it over. My hands were steady. It was harsh. It was direct. It was everything I had been too afraid to say for a decade. I copied the text. I opened a group message thread with Melissa, Linda, and Gordon. I pasted it. I hovered over the send button. I thought about the little girl I used to be, the one who tried so hard to be good, to be easy, to be low maintenance so her parents wouldn't have to worry about her while they worried about Melissa. I was still that girl, trying to be good, but I realize now that being good to them meant being bad to myself. I pressed send. I put the phone down on the desk and watched it. I expected an explosion. I expected the phone to ring instantly. I expected a barrage of texts in all caps. 1 minute passed, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. The silence was deafening. It was more terrifying than the noise. Finally, the phone buzzed once. I looked at the screen. It was a single message from Melissa. You made your choice. That was it. No screaming, no begging, no guilt trips. Just a flat, final statement. I waited for a response from my parents. Nothing. 10 minutes passed. An hour. The sun began to set outside the office windows, casting long orange shadows across the carpet. I sat there, staring at those 4 words. You made your choice. It sounded like a sentence. It sounded like a closing door. I packed up my bag. I walked to the elevator. I walked out into the cool evening air. I was free. I had set the boundary. I had protected my money and my job. But as I walked toward the subway, the silence from my phone felt heavy in my pocket. It didn't feel like peace. It felt like the calm before a much darker, much more violent storm. They were not done. They were just regrouping. And I had the sinking feeling that when they came back, they wouldn't be coming with open hands anymore. They would be coming with clenched fists. The silence that followed my line in the sand text message lasted for 3 weeks. It was a heavy, humid silence, like the air before a thunderstorm, but I used it to breathe. For the first time in years, my phone was not a source of anxiety. It sat on my desk, quiet and benign, no longer a portal for my sister's crises or my mother's guilt. I threw myself into my work at Meridian Insight. I stayed late, not because I had to, but because the office was orderly. Data behaved. Spreadsheets did not have feelings. Numbers added up to a logical conclusion. And if they did not, you could find the error and fix it. Families were not like that. In that vacuum of drama, I began to build the infrastructure of my new life. Jenna had recommended a financial advisor named Marcus, a man with a calming voice and an office that smelled of expensive leather and old books. I met him on a Tuesday evening, clutching a folder filled with my bank statements, my student loan documents, and the printout of my bonus structure. I feel like a fraud being here. I told him as I sat in the wingback chair, I have never had enough money to need advice before. Marcus smiled, adjusting his glasses. Wealth is not about how much you have. Ruby, he said, it is about what you do with it. Let us look at the picture. We spent an hour mapping out a strategy. It was intoxicating. We allocated $12,000 to kill the student loan immediately. We set aside $5,000 for an emergency fund. A real one. Not just a credit card with space on it. We put $15,000 into a high-yield savings account designated as condo down payment. When he showed me the projection on his screen, a graph where my net worth line finally crossed above zero and started climbing, I felt tears prick my eyes. This is real? I asked, touching the screen. It is real, he said. You are solvent. Ruby, you are on track to buy a home in 18 months if you keep your current savings rate. I walked out of his office feeling light, as if gravity had released its hold on me. I bought a celebratory latte on the way home, asking for oat milk and extra foam, and I did not feel guilty about the $6 it cost. I was a solvent woman. I had a plan, but plans, as I was about to learn, are fragile things when built on the fault lines of a fractured family. The silence broke on a Saturday. My mother called. I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. Hello? I said, my voice cautious. Ruby. Honey. Her voice was warm, breezy, as if the last month of tension had never happened. Your father and I are in the city for a doctor's appointment. We were thinking of grabbing a coffee. Just a quick visit. We miss you. I hesitated. My therapist. I had not started seeing one yet, but I had bookmarked a few websites, would probably tell me to say no. But the daughter in me, the one who still craved their approval, wavered. Just coffee? I asked. Is Melissa coming? No, just us. She promised. Just a quick catch-up. I agreed to meet them at a cafe 3 blocks from my apartment. Neutral ground, public space. They were sitting at a corner table when I arrived. My father looked older, his shoulders slumped in his flannel jacket. My mother looked anxious, her eyes darting around the shop until they landed on me. Ruby, she waved. I sat down. We went through the motions of a normal family. We talked about the weather. We talked about Dad's back pain. We talked about my job, though I kept the details vague. Then, inevitably, the conversation pivoted. Melissa is having a really hard time, Linda said, stirring her tea with aggressive clinks of the spoon. I took a sip of my black coffee. I am sorry to hear that, I said, keeping my voice neutral. She feels very hurt. Ruby, Linda continued, looking at me with those wide, pleading eyes. She feels like you have cut her off, like you think you are too good for us now. I set my cup down. Mom, I haven't cut anyone off. I set a boundary. There is a difference. I told her I would not be her ATM. That does not mean I don't love her. It feels the same to her. Gordon grunted. Money is how people show they care. Ruby, it is how we help each other. That is the problem. I leaned forward. deciding to test the waters of my new reality. I met with a financial advisor this week. I said. Linda recoiled slightly. A financial advisor? Like a stockbroker? He helps people plan for the future. I said, and it got me thinking. Maybe you guys and Melissa. Maybe we could all sit down with someone. Not him. Maybe a credit counselor or a family financial planner. Someone neutral. Why would we do that? Linda asked, her face hardening. Because clearly, the way we are doing things isn't working. I said gently, Melissa is always in crisis. You guys are always stressed about her. I am always being asked to fix it. Maybe if we had a professional look at the numbers, they could help Melissa make a budget, help her figure out how to live within her means so she doesn't need to ask for help every month. I thought it was a logical suggestion. I thought it was a kindness. I was wrong. Linda slammed her spoon down on the table. We don't need strangers telling us how to be a family. She hissed. Mom, it is not about. It is insulting. Ruby, she interrupted, her voice rising. You think because you have this fancy degree and this new money that you can just hire people to fix us? We are not a project for you to manage. We are your family. I am trying to help. I insisted. Help? Gordon scoffed. You want to help? Write your sister a check. That is help. Sitting her down with some guy in a suit to lecture her about buying generic brand cereal? That is humiliation. I sat back, defeated. They did not want a solution. They wanted a subsidy. They wanted the problem to go away. But they did not want to change the behaviors that caused it. They wanted me to fill the hole in the bucket, not help them patch it. I have to go. I said, standing up, I have a client meeting. Ruby? Wait, Linda called out, her anger instantly shifting back to desperation. Don't leave like this. I walked out of the coffee shop, my heart pounding. I realized then that the gap between us was not just financial, it was fundamental. We were speaking different languages. I was speaking the language of accountability, and they were speaking the language of survival. The following Wednesday, the weather turned cold. A biting wind whipped through the streets, rattling the windows of the office. I worked late, trying to distract myself from the lingering bad taste of the coffee date. It was almost 8 in the evening when I finally packed up my bag and headed home. I was exhausted. All I wanted was to put on sweatpants, order Thai food, and watch a documentary. I walked up the 4 flights of stairs to my apartment, digging in my purse for my keys. I reached the landing and stopped. My front door was locked, but something was wrong. I knew exactly how I left my door. I was a creature of habit. I always locked the deadbolt and the handle lock, and I always left the welcome mat perfectly centered in front of the frame. The mat was kicked slightly to the left, a jagged angle of rubber against the hallway tile. A cold prickle of unease danced down my spine. I looked at the lock. It looked normal. No scratches. No signs of force. Maybe I kicked the mat on my way out. I told myself, you are being paranoid. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The apartment was dark. It smelled different, usually. My place smelled of the vanilla diffuser I kept in the hallway and the faint scent of old paper. Tonight, there was another smell layered on top. Something floral, something powdery, and cigarette smoke. Faint, stale, clinging to the air like a ghost. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I did not smoke. No one who visited me smoked. Hello? I called out, my voice trembling. Silence. I flipped on the light switch. At first glance, everything looked normal. My couch was where it belonged. The TV was off. But as I walked further into the room, the subtle violations began to scream at me. The pile of mail I kept on the entry table had been moved. I always stacked it neatly, largest envelopes on the bottom. Now, it was a messy fan, as if someone had shuffled through it. I walked into the kitchen. A cabinet drawer was open an inch. I pulled it open. It was my junk drawer. Batteries, tape, scissors, nothing valuable. But things had been shifted. I walked to my small office corner in the living room. My breath hitched. My laptop was closed, just as I had left it, but the framed photo on my desk, A picture of me and Jenna from a trip to the beach was turned. It was facing the wall. Why would someone turn a photo? And then I saw it, the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. I kept it locked. The key was hidden in a hollow book on the bookshelf. The drawer was unlocked. It was slightly ajar. I pulled it open. My hanging files were disheveled. The folder labeled Financials was sticking up. The papers inside hastily shoved back in, crinkled at the corners. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grab the edge of the desk. Someone had been here. Someone had gone through my things. I ran to the entryway. I looked up at the corner of the ceiling, hidden behind the coat rack. The camera. I had bought a cheap, motion-activated security camera 6 months ago, mostly to keep an eye on the maintenance guy when he came to fix the radiator. I had almost forgotten it was there. I pulled out my phone, my fingers shaking so badly I dropped it twice before I could open the app. I scrolled through the timeline. 8:15 a.m., motion detected. That was me leaving for work. 1:30 p.m., motion detected. My stomach dropped. I pressed play. The video loaded. Grainy but clear enough. The door opened. 2 figures walked in. I watched, frozen in horror. As my mother and my sister stepped into my apartment, they did not break in. They used a key. Linda was holding it, a silver key with a red plastic cover. I recognized it immediately. It was the emergency key I had given her 5 years ago when I went on a business trip, just in case my pipes burst or I lost my purse. I had never asked for it back because I trusted her. They walked in casually, like they owned the place. Nice place, Melissa sneered. Looking around for a box, Linda closed the door behind them. Just be quick. Mel, I don't want to be here when she gets back. She won't be back for hours, Melissa said. She lives at that office. I watched as they moved through my home. It was a violation so intimate it felt physical. They did not steal the TV. They did not take my jewelry. They did something worse. They judged. Melissa walked into the kitchen. She opened the fridge. Organic spinach? She scoffed. Pulling out a bag. Must be nice. This costs $6. She put it back and opened the pantry. She picked up a box of expensive crackers and shook it. She buys the fancy stuff. Mom, Melissa said, and she tells me she can't help with the van. Linda was wandering around the living room. She picked up a throw pillow and checked the tag. She spends so much on things that don't matter. Linda sighed. Then, the moment that made me retch. Melissa went to the bookshelf. She pulled down the hollow book. She knew where it was. How did she know? Had she watched me use it before? She took the key. She unlocked the filing cabinet. She pulled out the folder. She pulled out the spreadsheet I had printed for my meeting with Marcus. The budget, the net worth projection. Look at this, Melissa whispered. She held the paper up to the light. Linda walked over. They stood there, heads together, reading my private financial life. She has $5,000 in a savings account, Melissa said, her voice trembling with rage. $5,000, just sitting there. And look here, Linda pointed. She is putting $15,000 toward a house. $15,000, Melissa repeated. She lowered the paper. Her face was twisted in a look of pure hatred. She is lying to us. Mom, she says she has loans to pay, but she is hoarding cash. She could fix everything for us today and still have money left over. She shoved the papers back into the folder, crumpling them. She slammed the drawer shut. She is selfish, Melissa spat. She is a selfish, lying bitch, Linda sighed. A sound of heavy resignation. Come on, we saw what we needed to see. They walked back to the door. Melissa paused at my desk. She looked at the photo of me and Jenna. She reached out and turned it to face the wall. She doesn't deserve to be happy, Melissa said. Then they left. The video ended. I stood in the center of my living room, clutching the phone. I felt cold, bone-deep cold. It wasn't a robbery. It was an audit. They had broken into my home to audit my finances, to prove to themselves that I was the villain they needed me to be. I did not scream. I did not cry. A strange, icy calm settled over me. I dialed my mother's number. She picked up on the second ring. Hi, honey, you working late? Mom, I said, I am at my apartment. Oh, you home for the night? "Why were you in my house today?" I asked. The silence on the other end was instant and absolute. I don't know what you mean," she stammered. "I have a camera." "Mom," I said, "I have a motion-activated camera in the entryway. I just watched the video. I watched you and Melissa use the emergency key. I watched you go through my fridge. I watched you unlock my filing cabinet and read my bank statements." There was a long pause. Then, a shift in her tone, defensive, sharp. "We were just checking on you," she said. "Checking on me?" I repeated, my voice rising. "By reading my financial records? By calling me a bitch in my own living room?" Melissa was worried. Linda said quickly, She thought you might be in trouble. She thought maybe you were lying about the money because you were in debt or something. We just wanted to make sure you were okay." "Do not lie to me," I shouted. I have never shouted at my mother before. I heard Melissa. She was looking for money. She was looking for ammunition. "Well, if you had just been honest with us, we wouldn't have had to look," Linda shouted back. "You sit there and cry poverty, saying you have loans, and then we see you have thousands of dollars sitting in a savings account, while your sister can't pay her electric bill? It is hurtful. Ruby, it is deceitful. I am not deceitful. That is my money. It is my privacy. You have no right to enter my home and go through my things. You are my daughter," Linda cried. "I have a right to know if you are hoarding wealth while the family suffers." I hung up. I could not listen to another word. I dialed Melissa. She sent me to voicemail. I called again and again. Finally, she answered. "What?" she snapped. "I am changing the locks," I said, "and if you ever set foot in my building again, I am calling the police." "Oh, stop being so dramatic." Melissa laughed. "It was a safety check. You should be thanking us. We made sure your apartment wasn't burning down. You read my diary. Melissa, you went through my files. I saw what I needed to see," she said, her voice dropping to a growl. "I saw that you are a liar. You have $5,000 just sitting there, and you let my kids eat generic macaroni. You are sick. Ruby, I am sick?" I laughed. A hysterical, jagged sound. "You broke into my house. That is a crime." "It is not a crime to visit your sister," she yelled. "God, you are so uptight. You are overreacting. We didn't take anything. We just wanted to know the truth. And now we know. Now we know exactly who you are." I hung up on her too. I stood there, shaking. My sanctuary was gone. They had invaded it. They had poisoned it. I walked to the door. I threw the deadbolt. It felt flimsy. It felt like a joke. I grabbed my laptop and searched for a 24-hour locksmith. I called the first number that popped up. "I need my locks changed." I told the dispatcher, "Tonight, right now." The locksmith arrived an hour later. He was a burly man with a kind face. He looked at the door, then at me. I must have looked like a wreck, pale and wide-eyed. "Break-in?" he asked gently as he drilled out the old cylinder. "Something like that," I whispered. He put in a high-security deadbolt. He gave me 3 shiny, new brass keys. "These are restricted keys," he said. "They can't be duplicated at a hardware store. No one gets in unless you give them one of these." I took the keys. They felt heavy. They felt like armor. "Thank you," I said. When he left, I locked the door. I slid the new bolt home. The thunk of the metal was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I sat down on the floor, my back against the door, and typed a message. To Mom and Melissa. "I have changed the locks. Do not try to use the key you have. It will not work. Do not come to my building. If you attempt to enter my home again, I will file a police report for breaking and entering. This is not a negotiation." I sent it. The explosion was immediate. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Melissa. "You are locking out your own mother? You are a psychopath." Melissa. "We only wanted to see where the bonus money was going. We have a right to know. You are stealing from this family." Linda. "Ruby, please, this is extreme. We were just worried. Don't shut us out. We love you." Melissa. "You are making a big deal out of nothing. We didn't take anything. You are just looking for a reason to be the victim. Poor little rich girl. I turned the phone off. I sat in the dark hallway, listening to the silence. I was safe. The door was locked. But inside, I felt shattered. They didn't see me. They didn't see Ruby, the person. They saw Ruby, the resource. And when the resource tried to protect itself, they saw it as a malfunction. I needed help, not financial help. I needed someone to help me understand how I had survived 32 years of this without seeing it for what it truly was. I opened my laptop again. I found the website for a therapist Jenna had mentioned, a woman who specialized in family trauma and enmeshment. I clicked Request Appointment. In the box for Reason for Visit, I stared at the blinking cursor. How do you summarize a lifetime of being eaten alive by the people who are supposed to nurture you? I typed, I am the responsible one, and I don't want to be anymore. I hit submit. I crawled into bed. Fully clothed, I felt bruised, violated, and incredibly lonely. But as I clutched the new brass key in my hand, I held on to one thought. They couldn't get in. For the first time in my life, I had a wall that they could not guilt their way through. It was a start. The invitation did not come in the mail. It did not come via text. I found out about my parents' 40th wedding anniversary party. The same way I found out about most things involving my family lately, through the curated window of social media. I was scrolling through my feed on a Tuesday night, trying to decompress after a long day of budget reconciliations, when I saw it. My cousin Sarah had posted a photo of a glittery, gold-embossed invitation. Can't wait to celebrate Aunt Linda and Uncle Gordon. 40 years of love. I stared at the screen. The date was 2 weeks away. The location was the Knights of Columbus Hall in our hometown, the same place where I had attended a dozen wedding receptions and retirement parties. I checked my mailbox. Empty. I checked my email. Nothing. The message was clear. I was being erased. They were scrubbing me out of the family portrait because I refused to pay the admission fee. I felt a sting of tears, hot and sudden, but I blinked them back. Fine, I told myself. If they don't want me there, I won't go. It saves me the gas money. But the next day, my phone rang. It was my father. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. Since the lock-changing incident, our communications had been brief and strained. Hello, Dad, I said. Ruby? He said. His voice sounded tired, the gravelly baritone worn thin. Did you get the invite? No, I said honestly. I didn't get anything. There was a pause. I heard him sigh, the sound of a man who was constantly being asked to referee a game he did not understand. Your mother. She is upset, he said. She didn't send one. She said if you don't care about family, you shouldn't be there. I gripped the phone tight. That figures, but I am sending one, Gordon said firmly. I put it in the mail today. You are my daughter. Ruby, it is 40 years. That is a big milestone. I want you there. Dad, I don't think that is a good idea. I said, Melissa hates me. Mom is barely speaking to me. If I show up, it is going to be a scene. It won't be a scene, he insisted, though he sounded unconvinced himself. We are not getting any younger. Ruby, 40 years, that is a lifetime. Don't let money ruin everything. Please, just come for dinner. Show your face. For me, don't let money ruin everything. The phrase echoed in my head long after we hung up. It was always framed that way. Money was the villain, not the entitlement, not the boundary stomping, not the theft, just the money itself. And by extension, the person holding on to it. I took the dilemma to my therapist. Dr. Evans, on Thursday. Doctor. Evans was a woman with sharp eyes and a voice that brooked no nonsense. She had spent the last 3 sessions helping me dismantle the guilt that had been installed in my operating system since birth. He wants me to go, I said, picking at a loose thread on the sofa arm. He says I shouldn't let money ruin it. And what do you want? She asked. I want to not be the bad guy. I admitted, I want to go and have it be normal. I want to eat cake and toast them and go home, but it won't be normal, will it? She challenged. No. I said, it will be a trap. So if you go with armor, she said. You go with terms. What are your terms? Ruby? I thought about it. I won't talk about the bonus. I said, if anyone brings it up, I walk away. And if I feel attacked, if they try to gang up on me, I leave. Immediately. Good. She said, and one more thing. You need to be prepared for the narrative they have already spun. You are walking into a room where a story has been told about you. A story where you are the villain. Can you handle that? I don't know. I said, I think you can. She said, but bring your truth with you, whatever that looks like. That night, I went to my filing cabinet, the one with the new lock. I pulled out my financial records, not the budget Melissa had sneered at, but the history, the bank statements going back 5 years, the credit card receipts, the Western Union transfers. I sat on the floor and organized them. I highlighted every transaction that had gone to my family: rent assistance, car repair, medical bill, groceries. I put them all in a crisp, blue folder. I didn't plan to show them to anyone. It was just for me. A physical reminder. Something I could touch when the gaslighting started. To prove to myself that I was not crazy. I was not selfish. I was a person who had given until it hurt. And I had the receipts to prove it. I put the folder in my purse. The Knights of Columbus Hall smelled of stale beer, floor wax, and roast beef. It was a smell that instantly transported me back to being 16, serving punch at my cousin's wedding. I walked in 10 minutes late. I had sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, doing breathing exercises, my hand resting on the leather bag that held my folder. The room was crowded. There were streamers twisted in gold and white crepe paper hanging from the ceiling. A DJ was playing soft classic rock in the corner. I stepped into the light. The reaction was subtle, but to me, it felt like a spotlight hitting my face. Heads turned. Conversations dipped in volume. I saw my Aunt Carol lean over to my cousin Mike and whisper something behind her hand. Mike looked at me, his expression cool and appraising. That's the one. I imagined them saying, that's the one who won't help. I kept my head high. I wore a navy blue dress that I had bought for a client dinner. It was tailored, professional, and expensive. Melissa would hate it. I walked toward the head table. My parents were sitting there, flanked by Melissa, Eric, and the kids. Melissa was wearing a bright red dress that was a little too tight across the chest. She looked radiant, in a frantic, high-energy way. Happy anniversary, I said, stopping in front of my parents. Ruby! Gordon stood up, his face breaking into a genuine smile. You came. He hugged me, hard. He smelled of Old Spice and whiskey. I'm glad you're here. Kid, he whispered. I pulled back and looked at my mother. Linda was sitting stiffly, her hands clutched around a glass of white wine. She looked at me, then at my dress, then back at my face. Hello? Ruby? She said. Her voice was brittle. We weren't sure you would make it. I wouldn't miss it. Mom, I said. I looked at Melissa. She was staring at me with a smirk that didn't reach her eyes. Nice dress, she said. Very corporate. Thanks, I said. You look great. Mel? She turned away, dismissing me. I found my seat. I was not at the head table. I was at table 4, with my second cousins and a few neighbors I hadn't seen in a decade. The dinner was an exercise in endurance. The neighbor to my left, Mrs. Gable, asked me about my job. I heard you are doing very well, she said, her eyes darting toward the head table. Your mother says you struck gold. I cut a piece of roast beef. I work hard. Mrs. Gable, I said. It is a good job. Must be nice to have that kind of freedom, she said, a little too loudly, to just worry about yourself. I chewed slowly, swallowing the meat which suddenly tasted like sawdust. The narrative had definitely been set. I was the selfish career woman, the miser, the Scrooge. I checked my watch. 1 hour down, 2 to go. Then, the speeches began. The DJ lowered the music. My Uncle Bob got up and told a few jokes about my dad's fishing skills. Everyone laughed. My cousin Sarah gave a sweet toast about how Linda had taught her to bake. Then, Melissa stood up. She held a microphone in one hand and a champagne flute in the other. She waited for the applause to die down. She loved this. She loved having the floor. "Mom, Dad," she began, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. 40 years. That is incredible. In a world where people give up on each other so easily, you guys stuck it out. There was a murmur of agreement from the room. "You taught us everything," Melissa continued. "You taught us that love isn't about big gestures or fancy things. It is about showing up. It is about sacrifice." She paused, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. "You taught us that family always shares," she said. "That when one of us is down, the others lift them up. That we don't count coins when it comes to the people we love." The room went very quiet. The tension was a physical thing, a wire pulled tight across the banquet hall. "We didn't have much growing up," Melissa said, her voice hardening. "We didn't have vacations or new cars, but we had each other, and I try to teach my kids that same lesson, that money comes and goes, but loyalty is forever." She took a sip of her champagne, her eyes never leaving my face. "It is sad, really," she said, adopting a tone of pity, "that some lessons just don't land for everyone. Some people get a little taste of success and they forget where they came from. They forget who held them when they were small." I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands, resting in my lap, began to shake. This was it, the ambush. Melissa wasn't done. "I know things have been tough for Eric and me lately," she said to the room, pivoting to her role as the martyr. "We have had some bad luck. The van is broken, the bills are piling up, and it is hard. You know? It is hard to look at your kids and tell them no when they ask for things. But at least I can look myself in the mirror. At least I know I would give the shirt off my back to anyone in this room." She gestured toward me with her glass. "So, here is to Mom and Dad," she said, her voice rising. "For being the kind of people who would never turn their backs on family, for being the kind of people who know what good family looks like, unlike some others." She raised her glass high. "To Mom and Dad." The room responded with a scattered, awkward murmur of, "To Mom and Dad." No one clapped. The silence that followed was excruciating. People were looking at their plates, at the ceiling, anywhere but at me. Melissa sat down, looking triumphant. She had put me on trial in front of everyone I knew. She had painted me as the villain, and she had done it with a microphone in her hand. My heart was hammering so hard, I thought it would crack my ribs. My fight-or-flight response was screaming at me to run, to grab my purse and sprint out the back door. But then I thought about the folder. I thought about the $7,000. I thought about the lock on my door. I thought about the therapist telling me to bring my truth. If I ran now, her story became the truth. If I ran, I was pleading guilty. I stood up. My legs felt like water. I walked to the DJ booth. The DJ looked at me, confused. "Can I have the mic?" I asked. He handed it to me. I walked to the center of the dance floor. The feedback whined slightly. A high-pitched screech that made everyone look up. Melissa's head snapped around. Her eyes went wide. She hadn't expected this. She expected me to crumble. I held the microphone with both hands to keep it from shaking. "Hi, everyone," I said. My voice was small, breathless. I cleared my throat and tried again. "Hi." The room was deadly silent. "I am Ruby," I said. "The other daughter, the one the lesson didn't land for." There was a gasp from Aunt Carol's table. I looked at my parents. Gordon looked terrified. Linda looked angry. "Melissa is right," I said. "Family is important. Sacrifice is important." I took a deep breath. "But there are different kinds of sacrifice," I said. "Some sacrifice is loud. It demands to be seen. And some sacrifice is quiet." I looked at Melissa. "I worked 2 jobs in college so I wouldn't have to ask Mom and Dad for money." I said, "I worked at the library during the day and scrubbed dishes at a diner at night. I did that because I knew they were paying for Melissa's wedding. Melissa's jaw dropped. And when I graduated, I said, gaining strength, my voice steadying, Mom and Dad co-signed a loan for me because they didn't have the cash to help. But when the payments started, they couldn't help with those either. So I paid them, every single month for 10 years. I never missed a payment. I never asked for help. I walked over to my table and picked up my purse. I pulled out the blue folder. I walked back to the center of the room. And last year, I said, holding the folder up, when Dad had his heart scare, do you remember that? Gordon went pale. The insurance didn't cover the ambulance. I said, and the deductible was $3,000. Mom called me crying. She said they were going to lose the house if they had to pay it. I looked at my mother. She was staring at me, her hand over her mouth. I paid it. I said, I paid $3,412 directly to the hospital. I told Mom not to tell Dad because I didn't want him to feel bad. I emptied my emergency fund to do it. A murmur rippled through the room. This was news. This was a bomb. And the rent, I said, turning to Melissa. 2 years ago, October, you were being evicted. You called me at midnight. I sent you $600. You said you would pay me back. You never did. I opened the folder. I pulled out a stack of papers. I have the receipts. I said, I have the bank transfer records. I have the hospital bill. I have every single time I saved this family from financial ruin. I held the papers up, shaking them slightly. I have given this family over $7,000 in the last 5 years. I said, my voice ringing out clearly now, fueled by a decade of silence. $7,000 that I worked for. $7,000 that I never asked back. I looked at the crowd. So when my sister stands here and tells you that I don't know how to share, or that I am selfish because I want to keep the bonus I earned, she is lying. I dropped the folder on the empty chair next to me. It landed with a heavy slap. I am not the villain. I said, I am just the bank. And the bank is closed. I put the microphone down on the table. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Melissa stood up, her chair screeching against the floor. You, she stammered, her face a mask of red fury. You tacky? Selfish? You brought receipts to an anniversary party? Who does that? You are trying to buy everyone's sympathy. She looked around the room, desperate for an ally. She is lying, Melissa screamed. She is twisting everything, but no one was looking at Melissa. They were looking at the papers on the chair. They were looking at me. Gordon stood up slowly. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. He walked over to me. He ignored Melissa. You paid the hospital bill? He whispered. I nodded. Yes, Dad. Linda said the insurance covered it, he said, his voice cracking. She told me it was taken care of. She lied, I said softly. Gordon closed his eyes. He looked over at Linda. She couldn't meet his gaze. She was staring at the tablecloth, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know. Ruby, Gordon said. He reached out and took my hand. His hand was shaking. I didn't know. I am so sorry. It's okay. Dad, I said, but I couldn't stay silent anymore. I know, he said. I know. I pulled my hand away gently. Happy anniversary, I said. I turned and walked out. I walked past the tables of stunned relatives. I walked past Mrs. Gable, whose mouth was hanging open. I walked past the DJ. I walked out into the cool night air of the parking lot. I got into my car. My hands were shaking so hard, I couldn't put the key in the ignition. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, gasping for air. I had done it. I had nuked the bridge. I had burned the narrative to the ground. I expected to feel guilty. I expected to feel the crushing weight of shame that always followed a confrontation with my family. But as I drove away, watching the lights of the hall fade in my rear-view mirror, I didn't feel shame. I felt lighter. I felt like I had finally put down a heavy backpack I'd been carrying since I was 12 years old. The truth was out. The receipts were on the table. They could hate me. They could scream at me. but they could no longer lie about me. I drove home with the radio off, listening to the hum of the tires on the pavement. When I got to my apartment, I walked up the stairs, exhausted but calm. I unlocked the door with my new key. I checked the mail on the entryway table. I had been in such a rush to leave for the party that I hadn't looked at it earlier. There was a large, stiff envelope sitting on top of the pile. It was green, certified mail. I frowned. I picked it up. The return address was a law firm I didn't recognize. Carter Associates. My stomach gave a familiar, sickening lurch. I tore open the envelope. I pulled out a single sheet of heavy, bonded paper. Dear Ms. Watson, we represent your sister, Melissa Carter, regarding the matter of the familial assets and the verbal agreement regarding the distribution of your recent performance bonus. It is our client's position that there was a pre-existing verbal contract and a family understanding that significant windfalls would be shared to support the collective welfare of the family unit, specifically the minor children involved. Your client asserts that your refusal to honor this agreement constitutes a breach of trust and financial harm. We are demanding a settlement of $20,000 to be paid within 30 days to avoid further legal action. I stared at the letter. The words swam before my eyes. Verbal contract. Familial assets. It was insane. It was legally baseless. There was no contract. There was no agreement. But that didn't matter. Melissa wasn't trying to win a lawsuit. She knew she couldn't win. She was using the legal system to harass me. She was willing to pay a lawyer, money she claimed she didn't have, to terrorize me into submission. I looked at the date on the letter. It had been sent 2 days ago, before the party, before the speech. She had planned this, while she was writing her toast about family loyalty. She had a lawyer drafting a demand letter to extort her own sister. I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound in the empty apartment. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I looked at the letter lying on the counter. The relief I had felt in the car evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. This wasn't drama. This was war. And if Melissa wanted a legal battle, she had no idea what she had just started. I had the receipts. I had the truth. And now, thanks to her, I had absolutely nothing left to lose. The green certified letter from Melissa's lawyer sat on my passenger seat like a radioactive isotope. I drove with the windows down, letting the cold air bite at my cheeks, trying to keep the panic at bay. My first instinct, the one bred into me by 3 decades of family conditioning, was to fold. It was to call Melissa, apologize for embarrassing her at the party, and write a check for $5,000 just to make the scary legal letter go away. But then I remembered the lock on my door. I remembered the receipts in the blue folder. I remembered the look on my father's face when he realized he had been lied to. I was not folding. I was fighting. I called a client of mine, a sharp-edged woman who ran a commercial real estate firm. She had once mentioned a lawyer she used for contract disputes, a man named Elias Thorne. I called his office at 9 in the morning. By 2 in the afternoon, I was sitting in his conference room. Elias Thorne was nothing like the strip mall lawyers I imagined Melissa using. He was older, with a voice like dry parchment, and eyes that seemed to have seen every variety of human greed. I laid everything out on the mahogany table, the certified letter, my journal, with the pages tabbed where I had recorded the break-in, the USB drive containing the security footage of my mother and sister rifling through my apartment, and the blue folder of financial history. Elias read the letter first. He adjusted his spectacles, read it again, and then set it down with a heavy sigh. "This is a shakedown. Ms. Watson," he said, his voice flat. "Is it legal?" I asked, my hands gripping the arms of the leather chair. "Can she actually sue me for a verbal contract?" Elias leaned back, steepling his fingers. "In this country, anyone can sue anyone for anything." He said, "That does not mean they will win. Based on what you have told me, there is no contract. A contract requires an offer, an acceptance, and consideration. Family tradition is not a contract. Entitlement is not a contract." He picked up the letter again and flicked the edge of the paper with his fingernail. They are banking on you being too scared to fight back, he said. They are hoping you will pay a settlement just to avoid the headache. It is a pressure tactic, pure and simple. And frankly, it is predatory. I felt a wave of relief so profound I almost slumped in the chair. So, what do we do? I asked. Do I ignore it? No, Elias said, his eyes hardening. You never ignore a legal threat, no matter how frivolous. If you ignore it, they might escalate just to see if you are bluffing. We answer, and we answer with a sledgehammer. We spent the next hour drafting the response. It was not emotional. It did not mention the 40 years of history or the heartbreak I felt. It was cold, clinical, and devastatingly precise. We categorically denied the existence of any agreement, verbal or written. We cited the specific dates and amounts of the financial assistance I had already provided, framing them as voluntary gifts that created no reciprocal obligation. We referenced the unauthorized entry into my apartment, noting that we had video evidence and were reserving the right to press criminal charges for trespassing and invasion of privacy if the harassment continued. And we ended with a sentence that made my heart race. Any further communication regarding this matter must be directed to this office. Ms. Watson will no longer respond to direct contact regarding financial demands. Send it, I said, signing the retainer agreement. 2 days later, the bomb detonated. I was at work, sitting in a budget meeting when my phone began to vibrate against the table. It buzzed once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. I glanced down. Melissa. I silenced it. It buzzed again immediately. I turned the phone over. 10 minutes later, a voicemail notification popped up. I waited until the meeting was over. I walked to the privacy of the stairwell, my heart thudding a heavy, irregular rhythm against my ribs. I pressed play. Ruby! Melissa's voice was distorted, shrill, cracking with a rage so raw it sounded painful. You got a lawyer? You seriously got a lawyer against your own sister? There was a sound of something being slammed in the background. Who do you think you are? Came the voice again. You think you are better than us? You think you can just hide behind some suit and threaten me with trespassing charges? I am your family. I wiped your nose when you were a baby. And now you are treating me like a criminal? She took a ragged breath. Fine. You want to play hardball? We will play hardball. But let me tell you something. Ruby, you are going to die alone. You are going to sit in that condo with your money and your fancy furniture, and no one is going to care when you rot. You chose paper over blood. I hope it was worth it. The message ended. I stood in the concrete stairwell, clutching the phone. The words "die alone" echoed in the cold space. It was the ultimate threat. It was the thing women like Melissa used to keep women like me in line. The fear that without the chaotic, draining warmth of the family clan, we would freeze to death in the wilderness. But as I stood there, listening to the silence of the stairwell, I realized something. I wasn't cold. I felt safe. For the first time in my life, her anger couldn't touch me. She couldn't come to my house because I had changed the locks. She couldn't bully me into writing a check because I had a lawyer. She could scream all she wanted, but she was screaming at a wall I had finally built high enough to block the sound. I did not call her back. I saved the voicemail, forwarded it to Elias, and went back to my desk. The second wave came that evening. I was heating up soup in my kitchen when Linda called. I hesitated. My therapist had told me I didn't have to answer. She said I was allowed to opt out, but this was my mother. The cord that connected us was frayed. But it wasn't severed yet. I picked up. Ruby? Her voice was wet, thick with tears. Hi, Mom, I said, leaning against the counter. Why are you doing this? She sobbed. Why did you send that letter? Melissa is hysterical. She says you threatened to have her arrested. I didn't threaten her. Mom, I said calmly. My lawyer stated that breaking into my apartment is a crime, which it is. But she is your sister, Linda wailed. Families don't sue each other. Families work things out. She sued me first. Mom, I reminded her. She sent a demand letter asking for $20,000. She hired a lawyer to extort me. I am just responding. She is desperate, Linda cried. She isn't thinking clearly. She just needs help. Ruby, can't you see that? The kids? The kids are going to suffer because you are being so stubborn. I closed my eyes. There it was, the final card. The grandchildren. Mom, I said, keeping my voice steady, though my hands were shaking. The kids are suffering because their parents are making bad financial decisions, not because I won't bail them out. I have given them thousands of dollars. It didn't fix anything. Just give her something. Linda begged. Just this once. Give her $5,000, just to make it go away. Just so we can be a family again. Please, Ruby, for me. I gripped the phone. Just give her something. That had been the mantra of my childhood. Just let her have the toy. Just let her have the front seat. Just let her have the last cookie. I had spent 32 years giving Melissa pieces of myself to keep the peace. No, I said. The silence on the other end was shocked. I will not pay to be treated badly. Mom, I said, I will not pay a ransom to my own family. If being a family means I have to be a victim, then I don't want to be part of it. Ruby, Linda whispered, sounding horrified. You don't mean that. I do, I said. I love you. Mom, but I am done. I hung up. I stood in the kitchen, the soup boiling over on the stove, staring at the phone. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. It felt like amputation, but as the silence settled back into the room, I realized that the pain I felt wasn't from the cut. It was the phantom pain of a limb that had been gangrenous for years. 3 weeks later, I signed the papers. The condo was in a town called Beacon, about 40 minutes away from where I grew up. It was far enough to be inconvenient for a drop-in visit, but close enough to commute to work. It was not a mansion. It was a 2-bedroom unit on the top floor of a converted brick factory. It had wide plank floors, exposed beams, and a small wrought iron balcony that overlooked the river. When the realtor handed me the keys, heavy, brass, real keys, I felt a physical shift in my center of gravity. This is mine, I thought. Not ours, not the family's, mine. I used the bonus money for the down payment. Every single cent of what remained after taxes and the student loan payoff went into this place. It was a strategic move. Even if I wanted to cave, even if the guilt became overwhelming at 3 a.m, I couldn't give Melissa the money now. It was gone. It was turned into brick and mortar. Moving day was quiet. I hired professional movers, another luxury I would have previously denied myself. I watched them carry my boxes, my simple furniture, my life, down the stairs of the old apartment. I left the old key on the counter. I left the memories of the break-in, the arguments, the feeling of being watched. As I drove toward Beacon, my car packed with fragile items, I drafted the final message in my head. I knew I had to send it. Ghosting them completely felt cowardly, and despite everything, I wanted to act with the integrity they lacked. I pulled over at a rest stop halfway to my new town. I took out my phone. Dear Mom, Dad, and Melissa, I am writing this to let you know that I have moved. I am safe and I am healthy. For my own well-being, I am taking a step back from our relationship. The events of the last few months, the demands for money, the invasion of my privacy, and the legal threats have shown me that we do not have a healthy dynamic. I love you. That has not changed, but I can no longer participate in a relationship where I am valued only for what I can provide financially. I need space. Please do not contact me. I will reach out when and if I am ready. I hope you all find peace. Ruby. I pressed send. Then, I did something I had promised myself I would do. I blocked their numbers. I blocked Melissa. I blocked Linda. I blocked Gordon. It felt violent. It felt necessary. I got back on the highway and drove toward the river. The first month was the hardest. The silence was absolute. There were no frantic texts, no guilt-tripping voicemails, no updates on who was sick, who was broke, or who was angry. It felt like withdrawal. I found myself reaching for my phone, checking for crises that weren't there. My nervous system was so adapted to high alert mode that peace felt suspicious. I woke up at night, heart racing, convinced I had forgotten to do something, pay something, fix something. But slowly, the cortisol receded. I started therapy with Dr. Evans in earnest. We talked about enmeshment. We talked about the role of the identified patient and the hero child. We unpacked the suitcase of guilt I had been dragging around and examined every item, deciding what to keep and what to throw away. I joined a yoga studio down the street. I was terrible at it. I fell over during tree pose, but nobody laughed. Nobody asked me for money. They just handed me a block and told me to breathe. I bought plants for the balcony, ferns, succulents, a small lemon tree. I watered them every morning, watching new leaves unfurl. It was a small act of nurturing. But this time, I was nurturing something that grew, not something that demanded to be fed and remained forever hungry. I met my neighbor, a retired art teacher named Sarah. She invited me over for tea one afternoon. We sat on her balcony, watching the river sluggishly move toward the sea. We talked about books. We talked about art. She didn't ask about my job. She didn't ask if I was married. She just offered me a biscuit and asked what I thought of the sunset. It was the most mundane afternoon of my life. It was heaven. At work, things shifted too, without the constant drain of my family drama. My focus sharpened. I took on a new project, a complex data migration for a healthcare provider. I bonded with my team, going out for drinks on Fridays and actually laughing. Not just performing happiness. Jenna came over to see the new place in late November. She walked in, carrying a bottle of champagne. She looked around at the exposed brick, the sunlight streaming through the windows, the thriving plants. "Ruby," she said, her eyes wide. "You did it," I smiled, leaning against the kitchen island. "I did. Does it hurt?" she asked gently. Knowing the cost of this peace, sometimes, I admitted, especially on Sundays, I miss the idea of them. I miss who I wanted them to be, but I don't miss the knot in my stomach. Jenna popped the cork. "To the knot in the stomach," she said, raising a glass. "May it never return." By December, I felt like a different person. My shoulders had dropped 2 inches. My skin was clearer. I had money in the bank, not a fortune, but enough that I didn't panic when my car needed new tires. I was sitting on my couch on a Tuesday evening, the snow falling softly outside the balcony doors. I had a fire going in the small gas fireplace. I was working on my laptop, reviewing my year-end financials. I looked at the spreadsheet. The student loan row was gone, deleted. The credit card debt was 0. The net worth column was positive and growing. It was a boring spreadsheet. It was beautiful. I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the past version of myself. The Ruby who had stood in that stairwell and refused to call her sister back. She had saved me. I closed the spreadsheet and opened my email to check for a message from a client. At the top of the inbox, a new email appeared. My heart gave a strange, syncopated thump. The sender was not a client. It was not spam. It was Eric Carter. I stared at the name. Melissa's husband. I hadn't blocked Eric. I suppose I had forgotten about him. He was always such a background character, the silent shadow behind Melissa's rage. He never texted. He never emailed. I hovered the mouse over the subject line. Subject: I think you should know what's really been going on. My finger trembled over the trackpad. The old Ruby, the one who lived in fear of the next crisis, would have deleted it. She would have run from the potential pain. But I wasn't that Ruby anymore. I was safe. I was in my home, paid for with my money, behind a locked door that only I had the key to. I clicked open. The email was short, just 3 sentences. "Hi, Ruby. I know you aren't talking to Melissa, and I don't blame you, but I found something on our shared laptop while I was looking for tax documents, and I think you need to see it. It turns out the family understanding regarding your bonus wasn't just an idea Melissa had after you got the money. Attached to the email was a PDF file." I stared at the screen, the firelight dancing in the reflection of the glass. The peace of the snowy evening suddenly felt very fragile. I took a deep breath, steeling myself against whatever ghost was about to jump out of the machine. I clicked the attachment. Thank you so much for listening to Revenge Stories. This journey with Ruby has been an intense one, exploring the painful but necessary act of breaking free from toxic family dynamics. I hope you found some strength or validation in her story. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you tuning in from the bustling streets of New York, the quiet countryside of England, or somewhere else entirely? Please leave a comment below and let me know. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more realistic, emotional dramas about justice and family secrets, please make sure to subscribe to the Revenge Stories channel. And finally, I want to hear your thoughts on the ending. What do you think Eric found? Was Ruby right to cut them off completely? Share your theories in the comments. Until next time.